Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It is an absolute pleasure to see so many of you here as we gather for PIC's 14th Foundation Day lecture. Tonight, we mark not just a milestone, but a celebration of knowledge, dialogue, and innovation. I trust you're all ready for an evening packed with thought-provoking insights. Before we begin, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guests on behalf of PIC. We have the privilege of being joined by three luminaries whose contribution to science, economics, and diplomacy have left a profound impact on both national and global stages. First up is our president, Dr. Mashelkar. Now, if there's anybody who truly embodies the spirit of innovation, it's Dr. Mashelkar, a globally acclaimed scientist and an indefatigable champion of intellectual property rights. Dr. Mashelkar has played a leading role in shaping India's scientific and technological landscape. From heading the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research to advising governments on innovation, his contributions are nothing short of transformative. It's truly an honor to have you preside over tonight's event, sir. Next, our beloved Vice President, Dr. Vijay Kelkar. Few can claim the level of influence on India's fiscal policies as Dr. Kelkar. Whether serving as chairman of the 13th Finance Commission or advising the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Kelkar has been at the forefront of shaping India's fiscal landscape. His expertise has guided crucial reforms, and we are deeply fortunate to have him with us tonight. Thank you, Dr. Kelkar, for your steadfast leadership and for joining us today. And finally, our chief guest for the evening, Honorable Minister Hardeep Singh Puri. Hands down, Minister Puri has the most impressive CV. From diplomacy to politics, he has done it all. As India's Union Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas, Minister Puri has been instrumental in crafting policies that shape the nation's future. And with over 4 decades in international diplomacy, including a tenure as India's permanent representative to the UN and as the President of the United Nations Security Council, he has steered negotiations on the global stage with finesse. We are privileged to have you deliver tonight's Foundation Day lecture, sir. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Now, to get the evening underway, I invite Dr. Vijay Kelkar to deliver the welcome remarks. Dr. Kelkar, the floor is yours.
I welcome the Honorable Minister to celebrate with us the Foundation Day of the Pune International Center. Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, as Dr. Lahiri pointed out, is one of India's most distinguished diplomat, And he had served in many major capitals. But most importantly, he was also a PR, permanent representative in UN at difficult times. And he has a very interesting book on Security Council because it's on his experience. And that's one of the most important reforms which are recommended are hopefully come to fruition now. I also want to welcome our Honorable Minister on my behalf and on behalf of my wife Lata, because we had the privilege and honor of knowing him and his family for over the last 3 decades. We were together in Geneva and also worked with him. So it's a double pleasure, Mr. Minister, to welcome you here. I think we all waiting to hear him, and he's agreed to speak on a very important national challenge, which is the challenge of energy. So I invite the Honourable Minister to give his lecture.
I was normally known as the guy who didn't need a mic, so this might just help. No. First of all, congratulations on the 14th Founders' Day of the Institute. I feel particularly privileged and honored to be invited here for a variety of reasons, which I will spell out briefly before I address the subject that you have invited me to speak on. I had the privilege as a young Joint Secretary to work with General Mehta in the Defense Ministry. I had the privilege of working with young Gautam then, it's still young, when I was Joint Secretary on the Americas Division. Vijay and I have been colleagues. My friend here, if I start naming all of them, he was Secretary when I was Ambassador in Brazil. Srikant Vaidya is a particularly close friend of mine. He and I agree on everything except the price of crude, which way it's going to go. He seems to believe it's going up. I always tell him it's going down. And don't misunderstand me, I won most of the predictions. And I've come to that when we discuss energy security. But more important, I think as a young civil servant, I had the privilege of enjoying the mentorship and guidance of Professor Kelkar. He had already distinguished himself as a civil servant at the national level when I joined him in the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development for a short while. We had fascinating discussions on where China was growing, and I can say that with all his perceptiveness, I think most of us underestimated the potential, because that was when China was renegotiating its entry into the multilateral trading system through its membership of the WTO. And I think whilst the whole world was salivating at the prospect, I'm talking about the industrialized West, of accessing the large market of China and a growing market, some of us were actually saying, hey, wait a minute, you know, it's a two-way process. They also have to assume certain rights, which they will get, but also certain obligations. And if that doesn't happen, you'll have a problem in the reverse. And I think some of us were quick to see that. We had a young Chinese colleague who used to interact with us. I don't know if you remember him, Mr. Tang. Then I had the privilege of working with Professor Mashelkar when I was ambassador to the UN in Geneva. And those were the days when the multilateral trading system appeared, at least to me, to be more robust than it is today. But I remember discussions on intellectual property. So I have so many friends here. I said, if I start growing into them, a lot of time will be taken up. The issue you have asked me to address today relates to energy security. If I have your indulgence, I will enlarge the scope of that a little to talk about energy security in the current global turbulence. Because to talk about energy security divorced from the current context may be easier. And I think for a country like India, which has a population 1.4 billion, an economy which is growing at reasonably good rates, and an energy consumption which is 3 times the global average, I think the global context becomes even more important for a country like India. Let me first try and startle you with a few statistics in terms of where we are on energy consumption today, both in the area of traditional energy, by which I mean fossil fuels, our foray into biofuels, advanced biofuels, and then in the attempts we are making to move in the direction of the fuel of the future, green hydrogen. Energy security, I'm not going to spend too much time because no matter whether you look at people who do serious academic writing or people who have to deal with the decision-making required to make sure energy security, in my view, essentially involves, and I don't think there'll be much disagreement on that, 3 essential challenges. 1, availability. 2, affordability. And 3, the transition to sustainability. Insofar as availability is concerned, make no mistake, irrespective of the political persuasion that you might have in terms of preferences of parties, etc., there is one imperative that no political dispensation can afford to ignore, or if it does so on its own peril. You need energy available at all points of time. That is the fundamental dharma of energy security. If you don't have it, you've had it. In India, we consume currently 5.4 million barrels of crude oil in a day. When I was accorded the privilege of joining this ministry, which was, I think, 3 years plus ago, our consumption was 5 million barrels a day. Irrespective of what the price of a barrel on the international market is, I submit to you that our energy requirement will be 3 times, if not higher, than the global average. Why do I say that? Because we have a large economy. We have an economy. Energy is the lifeline of any economy, more so in our case. Why? Because to propel economic growth and the other requirements, we have to overcome certain challenges. So in the 3 years that I've been minister in this ministry, it has grown from 5 million to 5.4 million barrels a day. It is likely to grow even further. I'm going to fast forward. My basis of my looking at data are the estimates of the international agencies, and Srikant and Rasal will bear with me. I think the ones we accept most readily are the assessments of the IAEA, British Petroleum, and everybody else, who say that in the next 2 decades, at least, and I underline that in bold, 25% of the increase in global demand for energy will come from India. Now, if that is their estimate and what I know here, based on my experience in 3 years, you don't have a choice. You must have energy available. We make plans for Atmanirbharta. We'll get there. But the honest truth is today, the imperative of making sure that all forms of energy are available to the consumer is an overriding factor. So our import dependence on crude, our dependence on crude imports is as high as 88%. In the case of natural gas, we are doing better, which is, I would put it at 45 to 50%, give or take what reference period and which statistics you're looking at. Why is our import dependence so high on fossil fuel? I have served as a diplomat for 39 years, but I think the time has come to be a little more direct. It has come simply because of neglect in the space of E&P, exploration and production. That neglect borders on criminal neglect. And that flows from a sense of assurance that if you can buy energy cheap outside, why should you want to invest large amounts in prospecting? Because if you invest appropriately, then the gestation for you to realize what you're looking for in terms of your investments takes just that much longer. So I'm sorry to say that there was a period, and I'm not being political about it, where we took the eye off the ball, and that is the neglect we are facing now. I often, and some of my OMCs are oil marketing companies, they are CMDs, like my friend here, are some of my closest friends. I spend more time with them these days than with anyone else. I also look at it from their point of view. If the government of the day doesn't have the commitment or the determination to push them in the direction of E&P, please look at it from their point of view. If I were to ask one of the entities, hypothetically ONGC or Oil India Limited, I would just say hypothetically look, go and do more E&P. The first question he's going to turn around and ask me is, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to invest hypothetically $100 million. You know what it means to my balance sheet in the short and medium term? It means that I will not be able to show the results. So I can understand that. So the government, whether it's the private sector or the state sector and the OMCs, has to step in with a clear vision. Now, what did we do? And that is where I think the story gets good. We have something like 3.5 million square kilometers of sedimentary basin in the country. Our exploitation of the sedimentary basin so far has been what? 0.5 million square kilometers. We have just we're raising it to 1 million square kilometers. Why does that? Because if you're not prospecting, you've got the sedimentary basin. Now you have to make it worth your own while to prospect. So one of the good decisions which took, I think a revolutionary decision, out of the 3.5 million square kilometers of sedimentary basin, we got over the objections of my friends like Shammi and the naval chief and the Coast Guard chief. You know, there's 1 million square kilometer which was no-go area. Why? अरे यहाँ पे वो Navy activity होती है, यहाँ पे वो Coast Guard activity होती है. Now, I've spent a little time with the Navy and the Coast Guard also, and I asked them, भैया कौन सी activity होती है which prevents deep sea offshore drilling, etc. Anyway, I don't have the margin of persuasion. These guys in uniform are persuasive guys. Anyway, the boss stepped in one day, took a decision, overrode all those objections, and whether they came from DRDO, so on. So 1 million square kilometers of no-go area freed. That sent a signal to all the major companies in the world. Hey, listen guys, India means business. The second decision, you know, we have a healthy approach to assets. Aao, invest karo. अरे वो तो अपना पैसा invest करेगा. And then the earlier mindset was after he invests and finds oil, you'll say, ये तो मेरा sovereign asset है. अब negotiate करते हैं. We realize that nobody is going to come and invest. that same Andaman area is same part of the same subsurface stuff which is floating from, all those areas. I'm not going to name. If there's oil there, why isn't there oil here? Our exploration story started, if I'm not mistaken, at 1800 something. Digboy, the first struck oil in Assam, where the colonial overlord was telling the guy, dig boy, and that's how it came to be known as the Digboy refinery. So we have a wealth of experience. We did some good stuff, Western offshore. Just now, ONGC struck gas off the Kakinada on the western coast. They're producing, or they're going to produce 45,000 barrels a day. So it's not happening, but the concerted, comprehensive, determined manner in which it should be done, we have regained that now. One of the bigger problems in this is data. So we decided we're going to take all the data and put it in a national repository in the University of Texas in Houston. The fact that we've been able to take the decision, I think, is significant in and of itself. But what is more serious, we still have work to do, we still get guys going, but the direction is very good. What are we doing to implement this? We had just now what is called the Open Acreage Licensing Policy round number 9. My friends in the press, if I were to characterize their misrepresentation as a mistake, that would be charitable. I think most of them either don't know their left elbow from their this thing or are motivated. For the first time, we've got bids on all the blocks on offer. And they say, bid nahi aayi. So I said, dekh to lo yaar. So one day I'll have a press conference saying, ye hai block, ye hai bids aaye hai, etc., etc. Our refining capacity, I need to say something because I'll then come to the global context. We are one of the most confident countries when it comes to our refining capacity. We currently have 252 million metric tons per annum capacity. The projects that we have ongoing take that capacity on to 300 million metric tons per annum. We are currently having a very robust brainstorming kind of discussion to see whether we should take it up to 400 or 450 million metric tons per annum. Why are these questions being asked? One, what is your assessment on the future dependence on fossil fuel? Is this going to last for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Let me tell you, for the methodology or framework of analysis I adopt, I think fossil fuels, and I'm sorry for the activists because we are making the transition, but they're going to be around for a very long time. And for purposes of analysis, I say if you look at the overall world situation today, at least 20, 30 years, Vaidya ji, utna to hoga? Okay. What is the global situation in terms of availability of oil? Again, I'm going to say something startling. It must cost how much to take a barrel of oil out? Kitne dollar? Huh? Depends on where you are. If you are in the Middle East, Gulf, you probably takes $2 to get an oil. Huh? If you are somewhere where you have to do deep sea, add all that, kitna? $8? Huh? A little more. Okay, I concede that. And they want to maintain the price at 80 or 100. If your cost is $2 a barrel and you want to maintain it 80 to 100, now I'm trudging into, I didn't name anyone. Is there a shortage of oil in the world? The answer is an emphatic capital letters N-O, no. Prior to the current uncertainty, we means the international energy community were extracting 102 million barrels a day. There is an organization called OPEC Plus. They are, for want of a better term, a producer's cartel. If I ever talk to my friends, the ministers concerned, and they're all very close friends of mine, and I say, bhai, wo price badha rahe ho? He said, no, we don't deal with price. I said, what do you deal with? We only deal with the amount of energy we release. Anyway, I'm not even an amateur economist, so I'm not going to tell him, that if you reduce the amount of oil there, price will be affected. But I don't go into that. Unlike some of my predecessors who used to go and tell them, no, you must reduce price. I'm too proud a person. I said, no. I tell them, jo karna hai karo. We'll deal with the situation. They took 5 million barrels of crude off the market. And they reduced it from 102 to 97 million barrels. In the hope that price of a barrel would be 80 plus. I told my friends then that we have fortunately reached a stage in the international discussions on energy where actually price is not going to be determined by that. Why? 2 or 3 things. New sources are coming onto the market. Give you a small example. There's a place called Guyana. So when I talked to the oil majors in the world, 4 or 5 of them, I said, come and invest. British Petroleum were here. I hosted them for a dinner at home the other day. And I said, come and find a Guyana here. And they will find a Guyana. But Guyana is there. Suriname. Just to give you an example. Give you another example. Brazil, where I just went, has a daily production of 3.3 million barrels. And they are now going to bring another 400,000 barrels onto the market. So these are just some examples of, I'm giving you, more oil being available. Whether that more oil which is available is on the market for transaction is a separate issue. So there's no shortage of oil. That's the first thing I'm doing. B, one large economy, $19 trillion, is by all evidence not in a position to utilize the kinds of quantities it was importing. It may be for a variety of reasons. It may be that they're bringing more electric vehicles on the road. I don't know. In fact, one trader told us recently that 51% of their shift is to electric vehicles, in which case they're using their thermal. They're not using this thing. But whatever the reason. United States, by the way, not many people know, and we import $20 billion of energy from the US every year. Not many people know that the United States actually produces 13 million barrels of oil in a day it extracts. It's one of the largest producers. It is perhaps the largest producer. But there is always this debate within the United States on whether fracking is a good thing or is a bad thing. The current president put a pause on new contracts. I've just come back from Houston from Gastech, and in case anyone quotes me, I'm going to qualify it by saying this is my personal view. I have a view that irrespective of the outcome of the celebration of democracy, which is going to take place there in November, the US will actually put more oil on the market after that. And I see 1 million barrels additional coming on from the US. So I've given you this long roundabout saying that there's going to be no shortage of oil. Now we have to deal with price and other things. I'll leave that turbulence and price for a minute. Let me spend a minute or two on the good things we are doing. We're increasing our E&P in order to ensure that there is availability and affordability. I can say with conviction, we are one of the few countries in the world which has actually brought the price of oil down at the retail bunk in the last 3 years. Why did we do it? How did we do it? The Prime Minister took a decision on 2 occasions, November 21 and May 22, that the central government's cess was brought down on 2 occasions. That reduced the price of oil. I think when the BJP states reduced their VAT by 13 rupees and 6 rupees. Our biofuel blending, which was at 1.5% in 2014, we had a target of 10% blending by November 22. We achieved that 5 months in advance. We had a blending target of 20% for 2030. Because we are doing well in the production of biofuels, we brought that forward to 2025, October, which is the ethanol blending year. I read a newspaper, one of the other ministries said they're telling Niti Aayog ki 20% blending ko to chhodiye aap 25% ka roadmap banaiye. That is the confidence because we are making ethanol from sugar, we are making ethanol from maize, we are making it from agricultural waste, we are making it from bamboo. It's taken off. Why the 20%? Because we were told that if you have 20% blended fuel, you don't need to change any parts in a car. And now inexpensive kits are available. In case go there, you can make the changes of those required parts. Biogas, we are doing very well. Some other areas of biofuels, I'm not going to take up time. I'm going to go in the direction of what I think is the biggest excitement, which is the fuel of the future, green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is the fuel of the future, I think, apart from solar as an energy provider, because all it takes to produce green hydrogen is a demonstrated capacity to bring down the cost per megawatt of solar energy, which we have demonstrated we can do. We brought it down from 25 cents to 3 cents a unit, MW. And then it requires an electrolyzer. And when I was in the United States, my counterpart, the Secretary for Energy, told me we would like to see India as the producer of electrolyzers in the world. Why she would want to see India and not some other place is not difficult to, there's an expression. But let me share with you why I think green hydrogen will succeed in India. Quite simply, because the gas does not lend itself to transportation, you will do very well on green hydrogen where you have local demand, local production, and local consumption. And I think that is where we will succeed. There are issues about battery storage, and I think some of the work we are doing in pump storage is going to make that difference. You take water to a certain height in a large, I'm giving you one where it's being done. You have what, 6 turbines there? You take it to a height of about 2,500, 3,000 feet, drop it, produce clean energy. You have a storage there itself so that you don't have nighttime, daytime, all these issues. And I think we've already done it. I think the wet trials, etc., are over. The government, in a very progressive step, made 19,700 crores available in the productivity-linked initiative, PLI scheme. And now every possible, conceivable electrolyzer manufacturer in the world wants to deal with India because this is where this thing, our companies, which have got a lot of, I'm talking about private sector, a lot of investment from outside. They have signed contracts for export of green ammonia to Uniper in Germany, to the new electricity generating plant being set up by the Singapore government through GE, etc. But at the end of the day, green hydrogen, green ammonia is good, but green hydrogen, and I think what I see in terms of development, I take a monthly meeting to see how green hydrogen is growing. I must pay a compliment to this man here. He's got what? You got your 15 buses running now? 15 top-class buses are running on the fuel cell on green hydrogen in Delhi. People don't know much about it because they're doing those customary trials that they have to do 20,000 kilometers till they get certification to run a commercial. I don't think they're very expensive, but they're demonstrational model. But I keep telling my colleagues in the Council of Minister or Cabinet, green hydrogen will succeed also because electricity, etc. But that's just only 17% of our energy mix. Our real requirement is in the refineries. And I think IOCL has 11, done 2 for green hydrogen. I'm told we have progressed into more. Once you use green hydrogen in the refineries, green hydrogen will take off. The central issue in green hydrogen is the cost. My American counterpart told me it should be 1 for 1 for 1, which means 1 kilo of green hydrogen for $1 for 10 years. We are very far from that $1. I think we are at about $5.50. But with the kind of advances in pump storage and other things which are being made in different technology, I think it can come down. With this cerebral audience, I can only say one thing. We import traditional energy worth what? $150 billion in a year. Please tell me from a public policy point of view, if you were to bring the cost of green hydrogen down in say 5 to 10 years, to say $2.5, $3, wouldn't there be a push saying instead of spending $150 billion, shift it to support for green hydrogen? And all that green hydrogen, what your fuel cell bus does is to throw water vapor in the air, as against all the other toxicity of varying levels. It's all very well to talk about EVs, don't get me wrong. Unless your grid is green, the EV is not going to do the other magic for us. I'll come to gas for a few minutes and then go to global turbulence. We took a decision a long time back that we wanted to change the mix of natural gas in our energy mix and take it from 6% to 15%. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with these different kinds of gases, this is qualitatively different from LPG. LPG comes out of a refining process in the listing. It comes from crude. We've done very well on the LPG part also. In 2014, before the Prime Minister assumed responsibility, we had 14 crore connection. By a connection, you mean 14 crore households. Today, we have 33 crore households. Okay, which means virtually the whole population, because if you have a household of 4 people or 5 people and you have 33 crore connections, you almost covered it. The beauty is that the cost per family of clean cooking medium per day, we worked it out, even for a non-Ujjwala beneficiary family is only about 15, 16 rupees in a day. And if you're an Ujjwala beneficiary, which means you are economically weaker section or below poverty line, then there are 10 crore, 30 lakhs Ujjwala beneficiaries. For them, it comes to only 5 rupees in a day, which is a remarkable story even globally. Because if in a country like Brazil, which is supposed to be the pioneer in biofuels, it's very rich in offshore oil also, 30% of its rural population is still using firewood and other toxic listing. The beauty of the Ujjwala scheme started in 2016 is that approximately 80% of the new connections are in rural areas. So it's now one final comment here, but this is not the end of the story. We also have a natural gas pipeline. We had 14,000 line kilometers in 2014. Our target is to take it to 33,000 line kilometers. We've already got 22,500. And kitchen cooking purpose natural gas, which comes through the pipeline, is 30% cheaper than this also. So we've done remarkably well. Biogas, I'm going to split. What is the global turbulence which leads to different assessments? And I first want to acknowledge that you can reach different conclusions with the facts on the ground. What are the facts on the ground? That the world today is in a far more vulnerable situation on issues relating to peace and security than any time in my career, or even Vijay and I are students of history. I think it's never been so vulnerable. The current global order was formulated when the Second World War was being contemplated for conclusion. An initiative took place to set out the coordinates of what a post-war order would look like. There were meetings in a sleepy New Hampshire village called Bretton Woods, where a lot of eminent economists and others had gathered to work out the coordinates of the new world. But essentially, a deal was struck between a man called John Maynard Keynes and the US Secretary of Finance, I think Mr. White. Yeah. And out of that was born the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. On the trading side, it was not so happy because the world's largest economy then and still larger economy now, the United States, did not feel comfortable of passing on the legislative authority to legislate on international trade issues to a supranational body. So the discussions for a international trade organization was stillborn, and they decided to take Chapter 4, which deals with tariffs and trade, and form what is called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And they gave it legal cover by calling it the Interim Committee for International Trade Order, ICITO. And then the Uruguay round discussions took place and the WTO was born, but only as a part of what was originally envisaged as the ITO. But the worst part of and that system clearly is dysfunctional now. Sorry, here I speak as a personal capacity, not as a minister of the government. It's dysfunctional. I mean, no matter which way you look at it, it is dysfunctional. But the most dysfunctionality comes from the peace and security part. Because the world was supposed to, according to the prevailing philosophy at that point of time, to be reordered according to the philosophy of to the victor belong the spoils. So the 5 so-called victors, all of them were actually not victors, they became permanent members of the Security Council with something called a veto. Why is that important? It's not really understood, but I think we need to spend a minute or two. Because if there is any designated agency in the world which has the authority to determine whether there is a threat to international peace and security, it is the Security Council. Once the Security Council determines that there is a threat to international peace and security, then the Security Council has the authority to authorize, within quotes, all means necessary, which essentially is a euphemism for authorizing use of force. Has the Security Council worked since it was established? We can have a long discussion. I had the privilege representing India when India was on the Council, when the 2 most famous or infamous situations arose. One was Libya, Resolution 1973, and the other was Syria. In the case of Libya, the Security Council authorized all means necessary, which means the use of force. The rest is history. In the case of Syria, which was equally bad, Security Council could not authorize use of force because they had learned the experience of Libya. So out of the 5 members, 2 permanent members decided they would not going to be allow military action. And by the experience of what happened in the case of the use of force in Libya, you know, where force was supposed to be used to rectify a situation, but you saw an entirely different set of consequences unleashed. Today, the Security Council stands totally paralyzed. After the Libya and Syria case, I'm not aware of any threat to international peace or security. I don't know, I may be out of touch. My other foreign service colleagues may say, I don't think they even refer matters to the Security Council. When the accession of Crimea took place, I'm talking about the earlier part, or military action took place, Russia, Ukraine, or if some non-state actor decides to fire a series of missiles, or somebody else engaged in stuff in the Middle East, you know, does anybody go to the Security Council? I don't think so. Therefore, what is the power or effectiveness of the Security Council, God forbid, if something major takes place tomorrow? And I heard a statement by the leader of the biggest economy that this could result in large-scale war. Having said that, let me now fast forward in order to conclude. I think large-scale war hopefully should not take place because all the stakeholders in this know that the consequences of that would far outweigh any gains. Now, that can be interpreted either way because, people will want to make gains or not. What is going to be the outcome of the US presidential election? How much will that impact on where? Look, the fact of the matter is, countries in the world will look for leadership. What happened in Afghanistan, I think, is a case in point. After so much investment, so much of equipment, so much loss of lives, one day the country just withdrew, leaving a void, and the Taliban walked into it. Now, how will that impact? One theory is that if there's an exacerbation of tensions, now I'm deliberately using words where I can't be quantified. It's quite bad. Let's get worse. Oil prices will shoot up. That is my friend's thesis. Not many people who worked all their lives on oil prices, they will come out. I'm afraid my thesis is exactly the opposite. Because today, most countries in the world realize three things. Background, fossil fuels are not going to be around forever. Even if you are sitting on an ocean of oil, once the transition takes place, the utility for that fossil fuel is it'll be a diminishing thing. Number two, the international price propped up at 80 was an artificial propping up. There was oil around. And that artificial propping up also took place because the code of conduct, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully because I can get misquoted. So, Rasal, you better have saying that actually I didn't say this, I said that kind of thing. The guys who are supposed to maintain quotas are not maintaining quotas. I read an article by Bloomberg yesterday saying, if you violate the quota, what happens? Well, if you violate the quota, you're told next time, cut even more. But the fact of the matter is, and I don't want to go into it, there are countries exporting more oil than they produce. It may be traders, I'm not interested. I am convinced that there is enough oil in the world and an exacerbation of tensions 2 days ago, I think the price went up. Today it's back to 68 or something. Now, I don't know, we are not in a betting mood, but there are people who are saying it'll go down to 60 or even below. What does that mean for us? I think for a country which is going to be largely dependent on energy, lower or stable oil prices is good news. Some of our companies like ONGC and OIL, which are producers, are going to crib in the short run, but I'm sure their adjustment to greener energies, etc., will also help. But at the end of the day, I think our exploration and production should not and must certainly not be made complacent because of this. We are going ahead because this is such a situation that tomorrow, if war takes place, something gets completely stopped. So you need what is called a strategic petroleum reserve. We did very well to do that, but I think for a country of India's needs, you could produce more. But going forward, I think the fact that we are making the green transition very quickly, that biofuels are going to be over 20% certainly. By the way, Brazil, which has been a traditional biofuel pioneer, they used to have about 25% biofuel blending. They told me when I was there last week, they're taking to 37%. Now, why is biofuel important for me? First of all, we've skirted this whole debate about food security, which I was very worried, and at home I was to be told by my wife, you guys are making a mistake, food security ka gadbad ho jayega. No. In India's case, biofuels actually helps the agrarian economy. When we did 10% blending, we saved 41,000 crores and we were able to give our farmers 42,400 crores. But we need to diversify. Sugar is water consumption, usko chhodiye, maize, we need to go into broken rice. My own passion these days is to go into seaweed, algae, and that there is no shortage. And I think, I don't know, there is a company in Pune which has excelled in the production of plants for biofuel. And when I talk to them, they're doing pilot projects in seaweed also. I was in Bangalore and I met a friend, and she told me when we had a discussion like this that her director of R&D in fact had discovered how to make ethanol from seaweed. And I said, where is he? He said he was worried about the biodiversity legislation and he went to Indonesia to do it. Then I went deeper into it. I discovered that he was talking about biodiversity, this thing that you can't have foreign investment there. But that doesn't prevent one of our OMCs from putting money into that production. I think we are talking to him, but we'll get that sorted out. India has overall saved 98,000 crores, I think, on the import bill through this biofuel blending program, and it's work which is just starting. So in our case, the energy economy is actually also sustaining and helping the agricultural economy. On global turbulence, one has to be careful about what one says, but if our thinking is correct that those who really control the levers of where war should take place, there are 4 or 5 countries, including the permanent members. India's has been a voice for peace. That voice is being increasingly listened to. But, you know, as students of history, we also know that accidents can sometimes create turbulence. We are equipped in order to deal with the situation, but we will have to remain vigilant. I want to thank you very much for giving me a patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Puri, for a stimulating lecture. The floor is now open for questions. Just a few housekeeping rules. I know there are really important people in this room, but please. Please wait for the mic to reach you before you ask your question. Limit yourself to one question and try to keep it brief. We'll be only taking 3 questions because of the paucity of time.
Yeah, I'm Prashant Khankoja, working in energy field, renewable energy and pump storage and other things. So thank you very much for taking us from global turbulence to energy economy in India. I just wanted to, since the subject is about strategy and measures about enhancing energy security, so I would like to know from you, sir, on this strategic measure, is there anything which is being planned to have one nation, one tariff? Because we are talking about one nation, one grid that is being worked out. But can we have, because now pump storage, you said we have grid arbitrage, the tariff arbitrage. Similarly, for overall India to have a better economy and to have a better grid parity and everything, can you
put the mic a little away from you so that I can hear you? Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any strategic measures to have a one nation, one tariff all across the nation?
Tariff on what?
Energy tariff. Because you are talking about energy security, affordability, availability, affordability and sustainability.
I know, I see where you're coming from. But first of all, you are dealing with a wide plethora of energies. You're dealing with biofuels, you're dealing with petrol, diesel, you're dealing with others. So I'm not sure that you want to have one tariff or one this thing on all these, number one. I've heard of suggestions to bring petrol and diesel under GST. Now, petrol and diesel under GST is something I was advocating for a long period of time. And now I'm very reassured that my senior colleague, the finance minister, also has on several occasions talked about bringing it to the GST, under GST. The Kerala High Court, if I remember correctly, last year had suggested that the GST Council should take this up in its agenda. And my recollection is that I think in a meeting in Allahabad, it came up on the GST Council, but as you know, the GST Council works on the principle of consensus and unanimity and consensus, and the state chief ministers have to agree to it. We are currently in the situation that while the BJP-ruled states have reduced their VAT, the non-BJP-ruled states are not even willing to forego the additional VAT. So I don't see that happening. Other than that, I must say to you, sir, and I hope you don't misunderstand me, these are market-driven processes. I don't sit and determine what the price should be. The market determines it. And the market will determine the price based on what is available. Like, I mean, OPEC, if you talk to them, they will tell you, no, we don't determine price. But if you cut the availability, it will determine price. So in a situation where your import dependence, both for fossil fuels, natural gas, is such where your refining margins are going to come on top, how do you calculate the cost of, let's say, a liter of petrol? Let me give you a simple thing. From there, maybe you will come to the conclusion, I don't know, whether the question is actually addressable or not. First, there is a cost of per barrel in the international market. You add to that the cost of insurance and freight. So cost of production, whatever the guy is selling outside to a trader or to a, my oil marketing companies are very clear. They float a tender and they say, you supply at the port of importation, at the port. So cost per barrel of production, cost of insurance, cost of freight. Then it comes into a refinery. There is a refining margin. Then that product comes from a refinery into the market. Then there is a dealer's margin and central and state taxes. So I don't know what a uniform tariff.
At least source-wise.
At the
Source-wise, energy source, one tariff. Because across
I think you need to go and look at the. You'll have to address this to the Secretary General of OPEC. I mean, if he wants, I mean, I know what his answer will be. Yaar. Guy costs $2 to produce, he wants 80. आप एक tariff लगवा दोगे तो 150 बनवा दोगे यार.
Thank you.
2 more questions only. Please wait for the mic to come to you. Don't ask your question from your place.
Hello, my name is Kotwal. I used to work for L&T. I'm a member of PIC. Some years back, and I'm talking about 8 years back or so, there was a lot of activity about the manufacture of LNG vessels in India. I myself had a lot of meetings with Gadkari, manufacture of LNG carriers. And at that time, I remember there was a need for 7 carriers to be made, and between GAIL and all that, there was a lot of discussion. And after that, all that had died down. So I want to know, what is the current thinking on whether India needs to manufacture LNG carriers for its future requirements? Thank you.
No, I can share with you my views on it. I've been telling the CMDs of the OMCs the day I joined, look way beyond where we are today. We must have a solid fleet of fuel tankers and carrying different kinds of this thing. So I'm very clear, and I am not even willing to wait to see where there is capacity. Earlier the capacity used to be only in Korea and Japan, then it was in 1 or 2 other places. I have monthly discussions on that. I said, see where there is some spare capacity, order the construction of a carrier. But I've gone much further. I've said, see where excess capacity is there in countries or in economic entities, buy them. And I think from our point of view, see, you might only be seeing the activity in the press, but our efforts are on. I am willing to look at it and push it from the point of view of the OMCs. Shipping Ministry, I'm sure, is looking at it. The other economic actors are looking at it, but it's a very high priority.
But if that is so, the actual manufacture of a first nuclear LNG carrier will take at least 5 years from day zero.
That's why I'm saying you should buy construction to karwai hai.
So, but it's not a question of capacity. People are willing to do it. Technology has to be available either in Japan or Korea. And things were progressing very well, and after that there has been a total silence. That's the reason.
There's no silence. Work is going on.
Good, thank you.
Maybe people don't talk about it. You see, there are 2 things involved. These are essentially market-driven conditions. But where we can come in is that the organized marketing companies, oil marketing companies, you see, earlier there was this perception that, growth here takes place in the private sector. I'm all for the private sector. But these guys in the last financial year, their profit after tax was 1,59,000 crores. So I keep telling them that, go in and correct. And they all agreed, by the way. It's not as if they're not agreeing. They all want to acquire, not only just for LNG, for other purposes also. Because I'm just give you a small example. We formed the Global Biofuels Alliance with Brazil, US and India being members of the Biofuels Alliance. We are going to have 20% blending. The Brazilians are going from 25 to 37%. The Americans are blending 15, 20%. I mean, the fact is biofuels are a traded commodity. Now, you have a situation, I'll give you an example, it's one of my favorite examples. An entrepreneur somewhere in Ahmedabad found out that in Africa you don't have clean cooking gas the way you have in India through LPG and natural gas. So he hit on a brilliant scheme. He sold 1 million cooktops to Kenya. And he's importing ethanol from Brazil to Kenya, and he's got a roaring business. So point I'm making is you need energy requires carriers. It can take the frame of pipes. I went to a large country recently. I found energy prices very high. When I started looking into it, very simple, they haven't formed a pipeline. They haven't got a pipeline. So even after we get 33,000 kilometers of line pipe, we will still need carriers. Look at your coastline, look at other things. Because the pipeline is not going to come down the coast like this and go up again. It's going to be from the terminals, etc. You need carriers. So I'm entirely with you. If you have any influence with these guys who take decisions, let me know. We'll join hands. So there is need for carrying capacity. But by the way, this is not just for fuel. When I was civil aviation minister, I used to tell them, don't plan for today, because as to today our civil aviation, we had 74 airports, we got 150 today. Because we were able to privatize Air India today the largest order of civil aviation aircraft to both the big producers, Boeing and Airbus, has come from India and the Indian civil aviation. So if you are getting a basics right on economic growth, there will be demand for carriage.
I am B.H. Shrikant, ethanol industrial consultant. This is not a question, this is just an humble interaction with you. You have mentioned Niti Aayog has asked you to go for admix of ethanol up to 25%. Technically, only up to 24% ethanol can be admixed in the petrol, which is called gasohol, without due modification in the internal combustion engine. If you exceed more than 24%, if you go for 30, 40 and 50%, then the due modification has to be there in the internal combustion engine. This is a practical problem, and I will tell you how to overcome it. We have to ask the car manufacturers to go for E100 compliant. Already some cars are making advertisement, our cars are E20 compliant. Okay, if we ask the cars to go for E100 compliant directly without spending on internal combustion engine modification, we can directly fill up 100% ethanol, we can run that car. This is the practical problems I want to bring to your notice.
My friend, I'm acutely conscious of what you're saying. But you look at it from my point of view, this is the chicken and egg story. When we started manufacturing or going down the ethanol road, we were told that demand nahi hogi. Then we were saying feedstock nahi hoga. So in 2014, we stopped at 1.5%. I was ambassador to Brazil, and the then government, particularly the then agricultural minister, Shri Sharad Pawar ji, had pioneered that we should have 5% blending in only 10 of our states and union territories. And we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it because the ecosystem didn't provide. Then we changed the ecosystem. Insofar as 20% blending on cars is concerned, we were earlier told that 20% bhi nahi blend ho sakta, gaadiyan kharab ho jayenge. And the problem was coming, I'll be very frank, from the automobile manufacturers. They are saying कि यार अच्छा वाला पेट्रोल पे चल रहा है गाड़ी, ये साला कहाँ से ला रहा है ये ethanol गड़बड़ कर देगा. Then my friends here, we turned around and gave them clinical evidence कि 20% चलाने में कुछ भी नहीं होगा. अगर को होगा भी दिया, सस्ती सी किट ले लो, वो भी हमने बेचनी शुरू कर दी, कुछ नहीं होगा. अभी हम ये नहीं कह रहे हैं कि हम existing system पे ले जाएंगे. But since I was getting this objection, and I'm not going to stop the country's progress because of this, I invited, who are the car manufacturers in India? Let's be very clear. ये कहाँ से आते हैं? They're either German or Japanese. Same gentlemen or ladies are selling vehicles there. And in a Brazilian petrol pump, you can go and on the computer in your car, you can decide on that day how much of petrol you want to mix and how much of diesel you want to mix, or how much of ethanol you want to mix, based on the world market price or the Brazilian price at that day. And you switch 60-40, 40-60. So when they came here, then the voices against going beyond 20% have subsided. But then I told them the real issue is different. Real issue is the car manufacturers also make something called E85, that the car can take up to 85% ethanol. We did one better. IOCL, my friend here, in 400 locations in the country, 400 pumps in the country in 4 states, we are selling 100% ethanol. So somebody turned around and said, "Yaar, kya kar rahe ho? 20% se zyada mix nahi karte, 100% kyun kiya?" I said, "This is a chicken and egg story. I want 100." Mr. Gadkari is a very strong supporter of this. Arey bhai, 100% ethanol agar available hai and you're driving a tractor on diesel, there'll be a temptation for you to use ethanol instead of diesel. And ethanol is far cleaner, it's greener. Okay. So this is the thing. We are going to get there slowly. I am not saying we are going above 20%. My assessment is that once economic interest comes in for 20%, same economic interest will say, why not go higher? So we should start, at least in terms of our perspective planning, preparing for that.
Thank you all for your thoughtful questions, and a special thank you to the Minister for your engaging responses. To bring this enriching evening to a close, I now invite Dr. Mashelkar to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All of you must have seen something unusual. Our Foundation Day is celebrated on 24th of September. And for last 13 years, sir, we did it on 24th September. This year, we are doing it on 27th September. You know why? Because we didn't want to miss you. And you can see from his scintillating, very insightful talk why we did it. So we want to really thank you. I want to just reflect on a couple of things that we talked about. I think the first is local demand, local production, local consumption. This is true. I mean, if one looks at it, digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization. And within decentralization, decentralized jobs, for example, is going to be critical. And therefore, whatever you said is also linked with green jobs, because we are keeping on talking about jobs and jobs. This is a simple calculation. And this is a real life one. There is a company which is doing that. 22 tons per day of compressed biogas is produced by using Napier grass. Now, Napier grass, the beauty is that you can take 4 crops a year, every sort of 3 months. And you go to the anaerobic digestion and you can create compressed. Now, if you have something like 5,000 of these in the country, you are talking about saving $18 billion of import. $18 billion. What do you require? Sunlight, water, a land which could be even semi-arid. Because the advances in like CRISPR-Cas9, etc., being used, switchgrass, Dr. Kelkar, now has been used, CRISPR-Cas has been used to create 40% more biogas and using semi-arid land. So I think there is a huge opportunity, and we have done a calculation for if we have these 5,000 decentralized plants, you can have some 1.5 million jobs and 1.5 million jobs at the time of the construction. So I think we are dealing with several issues altogether. So totally agree with you. I think this is the solution that we are looking at. The other issue is really when we talk about export, etc., it is like shipping sunshine, honestly. You know, while looking sort of everything that we have sort of a tremendous advantage. I'm very happy to tell you, because as a Punekar, I must speak about Pune. There is a lot of activity that is going on here. Some of the big players in that area are right here. Ravi Pandit, for example, and we'll talk during the dinner about what he is doing in terms of the agenda that you have set up. Green hydrogen, one talked about, fuel cells, one talked about. Sir, you will remember that on 22nd February, which is our Science Day, our Honorable Prime Minister launched the ferry Cochin shipyard, had done the ferry, and the PM hydrogen fuel cell based this thing. This has been done by National Chemical Laboratory here and KPIT Technologies. And this is a part of the Harinauka. We can green all the waterways. These ferries carry 50 people up and down, etc. Now there is an order for 20, will be 200, and we can lead the world. I think finally it is the leadership based on sort of technology. So I think this is a very exciting time. We can show to the world what we can do. You talked about energy security in the global turbulence, but also mentioned about availability, affordability, and transition to sustainability. That transition is going to be the most critical. And how do you do a just transition? That's what it is all about. So all in all, this has been a fantastic evening. We are really grateful to you for finding your time. And you have always had love and affection for PIC. We remember your last visit in the Asia Economic Dialogue Program. All that I wanted to say is that we are building our own campus, and this will be ready when you come next time, and we'll be happy to welcome you there. So thank you all very much, and let us show our appreciation with a thunderous applause.
Thank you, Dr. Mashelkar, for those gracious words. I would like to request Dr. Mashelkar to felicitate our chief guest with a Himru shawl from the erstwhile Aurangabad. I request Dr. Kelkar to present a small Pune memorabilia as a token of our gratitude and PIC's publications. With that, I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you for being a part of this special celebration. Thank you.